Welcome, everyone, to the Better Politics podcast. Today, we're speaking with two people who've spent years thinking seriously about what technology does to power, something we talk a lot about on this podcast, and what that means for the rest of us. Bruce Schneier, did I do it right?
Nope, Schneier. Rhymes with frequent flyer.
Schneier. Okay, ready? Bruce Schneier rhymes with frequent flyer, grew up in Brooklyn, the son of a judge from the Kings County Supreme Court in New York. He studied physics at the University of Rochester and computer science at American University before becoming one of the world's foremost authorities on security. Not just the technical kind, but the deeper questions of how societies protect themselves from the systems they build. Timely. The Economist called him a security guru. He's written my lucky number 14 books, how you've written 14 books. That's for another podcast, including a New York Times bestseller. He's lectured in public policy at the Harvard Kennedy School and served on the boards of the Electronic Frontier Foundation and Access Now. He describes himself, this is important, as a public interest technologist. And I have a feeling a little bit of an anthropologist to have that overview that you do. Joined also by Nathan Sanders, who studied physics and astrophysics at Michigan State and earned his doctorate in astronomy and astrophysics at Harvard. Out of this world. Sorry, couldn't help it, no pun intended. His career has ranged widely since, building and leading data science teams in the media industry as chief scientist for applied analytics at Warner Media, and before that at Legendary Pictures, and in biotech. He applies machine learning to public health and environmental justice, and as a fellow at the Berkman Klein Center, a place that's just been an extraordinary place for deep thinking on these issues since 2020, working on the infrastructure of democratic participation. He's writing and writes on AI and democracy, and it's appeared in the New York Times, The Atlantic, Wired, Foreign Policy, all the places. And he also asks how we protect democratic systems from the people who would exploit them. He also asks who those systems were built to serve in the first place, so the first principle questions, and what changes when you design them differently. So together, what caught my attention, many people sent me a link to this book, and I bought it at a local bookstore. They've written Rewiring Democracy, How AI Will Transform Our Politics, Government, and Citizenship. It's published in October 2025. Yes, buy a copy. And it's a book that refuses to be either a warning or a manifesto, which I really like. It's got a level-headed about this. Instead, it's advisedly optimistic, a clear-eyed account of how AI is already shaping lawmaking, regulation, the courts, civic participation, and a practical argument for how to bend it towards fairness, accountability, and genuine democratic participation rather than concentration of power and fewer hands. So this is a driving question that really drives us at the Better Politics Foundation. The other hat I wear, Bruce is wearing a hat. I wear another hat that's invisible as the co-founder of Apolitical, where we're working a lot on how public servants and governments both regulate but also use AI. This conversation is going to be much more pointed at the politics part of it, and how AI will change democracy and therefore politics, political leadership, political parties. So with that, I'm going to start off with a personal question because we start off as people first. That's why I love politics, because it's about people. Bruce, what was your childhood nickname?
I did not have a childhood nickname.
Okay.
So it's kind of as a kid, I kind of wished I had one, but no, I never had a nickname.
Okay, if you could, what would it be?
I have no idea. That's an interesting question.
Well, at the end, if you've come up with a nickname.
All right, I will think about it in my fish brain.
We can back engineer it. Nathan, how about you?
I'm going to be boring as well. I never had a childhood nickname, but I am very used to people confusing my name for Nate and Nathaniel. And oddly, over the phone, people always hear my name as Mason for some reason. So if you'll take those to be nicknames, that's the best I've got.
So you were never a Nate?
I was never a Nate, always a Nathan.
Right, but you could have been. So you had options. Bruce had no options.
I had the opportunity. You're right. I squandered it, I suppose.
I have a son named Otto, and I thought with such a short name, you wouldn't have any nicknames, but I think he has more nicknames than anyone I know. So the syllables can work with you and against you. But one, Bruce, it is a thing. Super. Sometimes that's really revealing about people. And this instance, very little about you two yet, but that's okay. Let's get into the revealing part. So you argue that AI is fundamentally a power amplifier. And historically, as we talk about, transformative tech has tended to concentrate power. So before societies figure out how to redistribute it again, if they do. So at the biggest level, just for our listeners who haven't read the book, how is AI changing democracy itself? Either one. Bruce.
The answer is in every way. When democracy is fundamentally a thing that people do, it is a process, it has a lot of parts. AI, because it is a technology that augments, in some cases replaces human thinking, it plays a role in every aspect of democracy. How it's changing it now is in small ways, but the potential is in large ways. And I mean this very broadly. Right? Politics, the act of getting elected, legislating, writing and passing legislation, government administration, the courts, citizenships. All of these are human processes that AI will touch in some way. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, but certainly changing it.
So one of the things, go ahead, Nathan, do you want to get in here?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. When Bruce and I started working on this topic together and writing together circa 2020, 2021, so many of the potential impacts of AI and democracy that we were thinking of were speculative at that time. Could the technology have the capability to help in this way? Would it ever be used in that way? And, society has come a long, long way in 5 or 6 years. It's no longer interesting, I think, for us to call out kind of the case studies in the first, to say, the first legislature has used AI in its amendment drafting process, which is something we've written about. Now, I think it's almost possible to take for granted that every organization in the world, much less every democratic institution and agency, is actively experimenting with integrating AI into their workflows. Of course, a lot of that is not highly visible to us. I think an interesting example, there was just a nice case study we were reading about a staffer in the U.S. House of Representatives who was looking to adopt AI for a legislative research task. There wasn't necessarily a pre-built system for him to use. He developed an agent on his own and found it very effective. We don't necessarily have visibility into those types of use cases or their impacts, but what we do see very visibly is the economic impacts of AI. I think that is the most visible impact of AI in democracies today. We see companies that have accumulated more wealth, certainly more market capitalization than any companies in the history of the world. And they're doing that on the back of interest and speculation in AI. And that represents just a phenomenal, in terms of magnitude, a phenomenal concentration of wealth and power that I think should be very worrying. And I think that is the single biggest thing that democracies need to grapple with today when it comes to AI.
So thank you both. Backing up, I've been around long enough that I remember when there wasn't the internet. And then internet came along and adoption, started going up. The AI adoption, well, AI has been around for a long time, but like the adoption has seemed to skyrocket in the last 5 years, as you were talking about, and still more to go. I guess one of the things I hear a lot from people in politics is like, yeah, AI feels different than when the internet can, but maybe it's not. Like, maybe it's not so different. Maybe it just feels different because it's in front of us right now. Is it that different, and how is it different than the internet?
I mean, we don't know because we're still in the early years, so everyone is speculating. My belief is that it is going to be different. I mean, the internet was a huge difference, but remember, it took a good 20 years for like businesses to figure out how to incorporate computerization into their processes. And it took that long to realize gains from computerization. I mean, this is going to take, I think, a while, but I mean, very broadly, to me, this is akin to the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution was the first time that we as a species figured out how to consume calories outside our body at scale, right? And the result of that is probably everything you, me, and all your listeners can see, right? The result of industrialization. This is the first time we figured out how to like have cognition at scale outside of our bodies. And my guess is you fast forward 100 years and society will be equally unrecognizable. Now the question is, what's the trajectory? Short term, probably not much. Long term, huge. In ways I don't think we could possibly imagine today.
Yeah, sort of to go from the astronomer, and I'm curious, Nathan, what is your view on this? Do you agree that this is kind of the industrial revolution moments? That's what AI, or do you have a different perspective? And where can you see this potentially going?
I do think Bruce got it right in terms of both uncertainties and what we don't know, but also the magnitude that I would expect from this transformation as well. I think the only thing that I would add is that to me, it's really impossible to disentangle the role of the internet from the role of AI. I think so much of the impact of AI is really enabled by the substrate of the internet. The opportunity for an AI agent that might run on my computer, it might run on an open AI server, to have impact in systems and organizations across the world, that's enabled by the internet. You could almost think of the impacts of AI as, downstream of or part of that revolution of the internet. And maybe it's an example of one of those things that we wouldn't have anticipated 20, 30 years ago when the internet was gaining steam, that it would lead continuously in some respects to the AI transformation that we're seeing right now.
So one of the things I really want to get us to the pointy end of, so you have AI, and then there's AI and democracy, and then there's the whole kind of ecosystem of what goes in democracy, from citizens to public services to government, all of these. But I want to get to the political leader piece of this, and then eventually to political parties. And Nathan, when you started off, you were saying, over the past 5 years, all these case studies have popped up, and, you hear the first of this, the first of that. Let's give the listeners kind of the tour de tab of what you know of sort of what's come up in political leadership as use cases. We run something at the Athens Democracy Forum, an AI caucus for parliamentarians, where they're asking for use cases and they're interested in building this. So I'd love to hear from you what is being done now. I'll preface this a little bit by saying 2 summers ago, we looked at some research that showed that when citizens asked, do you think politicians should be replaced by AI, 51% of those people voted yes. Different in different countries. I sit in Germany. You can imagine it was a bit lower. We have a bit of nervousness of absolute power.
Funny, my guess is it's frustration with politicians rather than optimism about AI. That's my guess.
I would guess that too, but still it's a vote for something they don't even really understand or know, right? So it still says something about optimism, unless they think it can't get worse, which it can. I'm sitting in Germany. Life can also always get worse. So Nathan, just with that and Bruce as a backdrop, where are the use cases that you've seen?
Maybe I'll just give the quickest tour of some of the, I think, really seminal first use cases that we talk in our book. I'll give an example from politics, from the judiciary, and from legislation. So let's start with the last one. The first law written by AI that was passed into law that we know of came in 2023 in Brazil. And it wasn't at the federal level, it was at the local level. There was a city councilor who was looking to write legislation to help with the constituent issue around water meters, and didn't necessarily have either the technical knowledge or the staff resources to do the research to figure out how that bill should be written. And in 2023, he turned to ChatGPT, wrote a prompt, in about 15 seconds had a draft of a bill, thought it looked pretty good, filed it. His city council agreed. It was approved unanimously. It was passed into law. And only after that did the councilor reveal that it was written by AI. And I suspect there have been many more examples like that since then that we may not know about, where AI has written policy that has already become law. A use case from the judiciary, we know that at least in one case where the jurist has been very vocal about this, a U.S. federal court judge has been leveraging AI to help with judicial interpretation. The point of view that I believe he's expressed is that whereas he might have turned to a dictionary in the past to understand the plain meaning of language written into law, he might have trusted, let's say, Merriam-Webster to decide for the court what the meaning of a word is. Today, he is trying to ChatGPT to interpret the language of law and to apply that in his judicial reasoning. With both these examples, I'm sure we'll have a deeper conversation about whether they're good or bad or in what context, but these use cases are clearly happening, and we probably only know the tip of the iceberg. I'll give you one more example from the political sphere. We've been writing about and following an innovation in politics in Japan that started as one individual candidate who himself was an AI engineer running for office for the first time back in 2023 for governor of Tokyo. and recognized that without a political party behind him, without name recognition, he needed to do something innovative to reach and engage voters. And what he decided to do was innovate developing an AI avatar that would represent himself in conversations with voters. He operated this on a live stream continuously for weeks. It answered thousands of questions from voters, and it built him enough engagement to win 150,000 votes coming out of nowhere for the governor's race. He didn't win that race, but what happened afterwards is that he formed a new political party in Japan called the Future Party, or Team Mirai, and he has now won, I believe, a total of 12 seats in the Japanese Diet, and has made this brand new political party into not, a politically controlling authority in Japan, but now one of the 5 or 6 largest parties in Japan's multi-party democracy. And he's been continuing to invest the resources of that party in using AI, developing applications that help with and support voter engagement. I think it's a really interesting example of the kind of innovation that's possible in politics using this technology.
Super. Bruce, do you have any to add in that tour, or is that a good coverage?
I mean, there's a lot of things in politics. Germany, where there's a lot of political parties, they regularly produce voter guides so voters can know what's going on. Recently, they added a chatbot functionality to that, where instead of reading a dry piece of paper, you can engage in a conversation to learn about different political parties. That's another political one. Chile has a rule that when you introduce legislation, you need to explain how it affects its existing legislation. That's notoriously hard. They have leveraged AI to help with that process. France built an AI model specifically designed for legislators to write French law. You can wander around the world and there are all sorts of really interesting use cases. And all of these are humans using the technology to be better politicians, better legislators, better actors in democracy, right? So it's not, we're going to replace a politician with AI, although we have had candidates that have, one in the US I can think of, mayor of Cheyenne, Wyoming, and one in the UK as an MP, basically ran on the platform, vote for me and I'll do whatever the AI says. Neither of them won, which is probably for the best.
So one of the things that we do a lot of listening to what politicians need, and how the workplace where politicians go, if you call legislatures or, city hall, where they go, workplaces, aren't fit for the job of a politician today. We do a lot of work on the mental well-being of politicians, everything from death threats that they get to the cognitive load of their jobs, getting up at 4 a.m. to read their things, going to bed, trying to see a kid in the middle of it. When we brought the MPs together and we gave them the opportunity to design a magic wand and build an agent for whatever problem you had or however you wanted to use it, most of them turned to legislative writing or information gathering. Those are the sort of in their minds, they're framed that you go to the internet for those things. What I thought they might go to is something that would help them make decisions better, optimize the timing that they made decisions, more like helping it be a better version of themselves versus outsourcing the things that we did on a computer, but faster. Have you seen anything like that that's helped them optimize their thinking time, their sleeping, anything like that to help them as humans, scheduling, responding to emails, all of that?
Well, I'll start maybe by just questioning your observation a little bit to say that to me, legislative writing is really, it's a series of decision-making tasks. The authoring of a bill, involves so many choices about policy, some very large, some very small. And I think that's really important when we think about the role of AI assistive capabilities. On the one hand, it means that it can really be enabling in the way that you're suggesting of, assisting the human cognitive loads that Bruce was talking about earlier. On the other hand, it also, I think, heightens the stakes for leveraging AI in those use cases. We shouldn't forget that when we leverage an AI for what may feel like the ministerial task of drafting legislation, that also means leveraging an AI agent to make choices. And that's not new. Legislators have always relied on staff, and far too often perhaps relying on outside lobbyists and industry figures, et cetera, to help make that series of choices. But we should think about AI in the same way. When it's used for those types of tasks, it is doing real cognitive labor. It is directly facilitating decision-making, and we should be aware of that.
So let's talk about how AI might change the job, the actual job that you do. And your book suggests that AI might increase the advantage of charismatic political performers, while reducing, the value of that traditional governing competence. Can you say more about that? Why you think that's so, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing? I know you guys often say it's good and bad, but I'm curious, how is that going to change the traits that make for effective political leaders?
So that was one future we looked at. And what we're really looking at is the ability of AI broadly to help people run for office. And so don't think of, don't think of president. Don't think of, national legislature. Think of local office. Think of city council. Think of a school board. Think of, there's no money, there's no time, there's no expertise. It's just people running. And it's hard, which means you got a lot of, rich white guys running, because that's who it's easiest for. If AI can help people run for office, and there are a bunch of tools that are out there to help people file the paperwork, help them put up a website, help them with with positions, help them with fundraising, get out the vote campaigns, all of these things, right? That could lower the barrier to run for office, which, right, has both good and bad. I think mostly it's a good, because now more people can choose to do this very democratic thing, whereas before they might not be able to. But, it also means that people without expertise can do these things. And that's the charismatic part. So a lot of things are happening here.
Nathan, thoughts on that question? Like how it's going to change the traits that help politicians get elected, keep elected, deliver? Like, how's it going to change the role of who gets in and who stays?
Well, I'm really interested to see how constituent communication is changing in the use of AI. And you said that you might expect us to say they're both things good and bad. And I do feel ambivalent here. I think we can see things that are good and bad happening. One thing I think AI has clearly done over the last couple of years is accelerate the memification of our politics. We see politicians using AI to generate catchy images, mimetic images that do go viral on social media and really influence the political debate. That often makes me uncomfortable. I'm not sure that that's enriching our political dialogue, although I'm open-minded to the idea that new forms of communication and popular communication does evolve, and that can be okay. But I think we can all think of some examples where that hasn't felt very productive. But I do think we also see examples of constituent communication really being enriched. We see examples of platforms that are trying to achieve what's called deep and broad listening. The idea that whereas you as a political candidate may only be able to sit down and have an in-depth conversation with a handful of constituents, let's say each day or each week. However, you can use AI to scale that amount of communication and to have conversations with many people in depth and to gather input and feedback that can help shape your policy position and help you understand your electorate better. We see examples of technology platforms being built for that purpose. We see at least one or two examples of them being used in ways I think are interesting, if not also effective. And I hope that we'll see more of that kind of innovation.
Well, I appreciate you kind of giving us that tour. One of the things we think about at the Better Politics Foundation is something called the Political Leadership Impact Path. So if you think about the beginning of that is a signal that you receive somewhere that political leadership might be something that you want to do. My experience in being in this space for about 30 years is, for the most part, the people who I feel deliver best on democracy are people whose hands aren't raised and that you kind of say, hey, would you consider this? So it's a draft versus a pick me. Normally, there are some exceptions to that. So that's the first of the signals. And then you, in the perfect world, they actually learned about the job of being a political leader and actually governing before they get elected. Because one of the things we find out a lot is that people spend all the time on the running for office, on kind of the job interview, but they don't actually know what to do when they get in office. We're seeing this right now in the UK, Bolivia, Sri Lanka. It's this weird job where you have to have, there's no qualifications really, except sometimes citizenship and age to run for office. And there's real questions we ask, like, should there be qualifications? Should you need a license? Just like you drive a car or a boat or an airplane, should you need that for politics? That's another discussion. But if you have a thought on that, I'd be very interested. Then people join political parties, then they run for office, and that really important transition time, particularly their first time in office, where they tell us they don't even know what the bathrooms are, let alone how bills become laws sometimes. I've met political leaders who haven't read the constitution of their countries, and then they're MPs. You're like, oh, that's probably a good start. And then there's this staying in office when the world is changing, which includes, Nathan, constituency services, like how to do that better. I also meet political leaders that don't know their job is constituency services before they get elected, which is quite interesting. And then there's leaving. So we think across that, that entire political leadership impact path, not just in the getting elected piece. So I appreciate that you gave examples of how to use it as a legislature, but also how to get elected. In that weird valley, those first 100 days, first year in office, have you seen anything like helping onboard people, how AI might be helping in transition? You've seen that?
It's a good question. I'm thinking about some of the work in legislative engagement that has been assisted by AI. This isn't necessarily focused on the individual legislator and helping them learn the job, but definitely focused on deepening the engagement between each of those legislators and their constituents, helping them exchange information better, helping them learn about the needs of their constituency. For a brand new legislator who is suddenly responsible for making and voting on policy, not just on one or two issues that they may have specialization in, expertise in, committee assignments in, but responsible for all of the policy matters that come before the legislature, I think understanding the array of policy prescriptions and how your constituents think about them must be one of the hardest things to do. So I think these legislative engagement platforms that facilitate that exchange of information and use AI to help synthesize that huge volume of data can be really useful. Just to give you two concrete examples, one is a project that I'm involved in here in Massachusetts, which is called Maple. It's the Massachusetts Platform for Legislative Engagement. We've integrated data on all the bills before the legislature. We make it very easy for constituents to give testimony, to submit their own comments to their legislators through this platform. In doing so, we've assembled the first public archive of constituent testimony on legislation in Massachusetts. And we have AI-assisted features to help users, be they constituents or legislators, understand the content of those bills, which can be very long and dense in legalese, and also to synthesize the testimony that people are submitting, what people think about those bills. I mentioned earlier the political party in Japan called Team Mirai. As they've evolved, they view themselves as what they call a utility party, meaning that they're really not intending, at least what they say is they're not intending to be ideologically aligned. Rather, they're trying to build political capacities and technologies that support the entire diet, the whole legislature and all of its parties. One of the tools that they've built is an AI-powered application called Jikai, translating to assembly, that works a little bit like that Maple platform I just described. It brings together in a simple web interface information about all the bills in the diet. It provides AI chat and assistive features to help people ask questions and understand what those bills would do, what their policy impact would be, and what people are saying about them in their case in terms of what public reporting, journalistic reporting exists on those policy issues.
We did a report a couple of years ago called AI and Political Leadership. This was kind of early days. It was right after the ChatGPT explosion when everyone was talking about it. And one of the things I found was that people who were either balanced or optimistic about AI and political leadership were ones that have actually used it, spent some time with it, had been in technology roles before. The ones that weren't were very, very skeptical of that. And so I'm curious, which isn't a surprise, right? Like sometimes familiarity helps. Sometimes it scares you a little bit more. But I'm curious about like the psychographic, anything about what you're finding these early adopters. Is it that they've worked in technology? Is that they I don't know. Is there anything about people who are using AI now in politics that is helpful for us to understand to help adoption for other folks? Because, for example, I remember I've worked in politics so long that I remember all we had was yard signs, and then we had like targeted mailing, then we had targeted phone calls, and then we had emails that were targeted, and then, it kind of, then social media, blah, blah, blah. And every time I found in particular, women were behind the curve as politicians in adopting it because they were kind of skeptical of some of the technology. So I'm just curious, is there anything we learn about, sorry, Bruce, you're about to get in, about who's using it and who's not that we should think through?
I mean, I don't think we know because a lot of this use is not public. And this is important. If somebody decides to use these tools to help them write or help them create a web page or for political polling, they just get to decide and they don't have to make it public. Very different than if it's sort of a public use within government.
Yeah.
It's certainly people who are going to be early adopters of tech are more likely to be early adopters of this tech. Doesn't necessarily mean you're a techie. And I do believe that familiarity is really important here. This technology is changing very fast, where I mean month on month. So if you learned something 4 months ago about its limitations, it might not be true today. And that kind of familiarity is really important, both for use and for regulating and sort of dealing with this technology as it affects society. So I think it's being also used more by staffers, and the legislator might not even realize it. We know a group called Tech Congress, where legislative staffers talk about technology and use in the U.S. Congress. And Nathan and I spoke to them last year sometime. And there is a lot of use of AI for summarization, some of it for responding to constituents. And it is a way that they're making their job easier, dealing with the deluge of sometimes AI written commentary to them. There's a little bit of arms race here. But there's a lot of very savvy staffers that are using this tech not to replace them, but to make them more effective, to make them better legislators, more responsive in so many ways.
And when you were talking to them, were there any boy, we wish we could use AI for this? Nathan, do you want to talk about that?
I was going to pivot to a different point, actually. Sorry, let me.
Okay, go ahead. You can pivot. You can pivot if you want. You can pivot and come back to it if it comes to you.
You can come back.
Pivoting's good. I'm a basketball player. We pivot. That's kind of one of the main things that you do in basketball. So
I am too. I've got my hoop right behind me.
There you go.
I was going to pivot to say that I think Bruce and I very often interact with communities that are deeply skeptical or even actively resistant to AI adoption. And I find that they usually have very good reasons for doing that. I think often the reason is that they recognize legitimately that they don't have control over how the technology is being adopted in their sphere, whether that's their workplace, their community, their government, wherever. An example of this, Bruce and I obviously spend a lot of time writing and working and thinking a lot with writers. I think a lot of writers recognize that whether or not they find AI useful in their writing process, they are seeing their jobs and their livelihoods threatened by others who are using AI to automate the work that they would do, and they recognize the injustice in that. I think the solution to that and to have a more equitable, even adoption of AI is to make sure that people do have visibility and control over where AI is adopted in our society. I think one straightforward, simple way of doing this is having a public comment process around AI adoption in government. Some governments are doing this, I think, pretty effectively. An example being Canada, which has years ago, before the kind of widespread adoption of tools like ChatGPT, had put in place a directive around automated decision making and a process of disclosure and allowing for public feedback on when and where machines and AI would be used in government decision making processes. And you can go on the Canadian government's website and see agencies explaining how they intend to use AI, and people have the opportunity to give feedback on that. I think that's really important. In the US, I don't think we have anything nearly that mature in terms of public feedback infrastructure. The Biden administration had done some basic disclosure around thousands of initial use cases of AI across government. The Trump administration, I believe, has promised to have a similar disclosure that I don't believe has happened yet, but I think there's nothing robust in terms of public input. And I think the only way to build trust among our society and confidence in how AI is being used is to have that kind of negotiation.
Have you seen anything on a citizens' assembly on AI? Because one thing that we hear a lot is that public comments, one can be flooded by AI itself, and it's often for the nerdy people who only, have time to do that stuff, and that citizens' assemblies are the more effective, more inclusive way. I'm just curious if you've seen anything related to that.
We've seen a lot on citizen assemblies with AI in Germany.
But not about AI.
Right, so Germany had a 500,000 person citizen assembly online that using AI. I don't know of any. I mean, yes, right? What's their name? Nathan, you remember. I can tell you remember.
Yeah, I know in Washington, D.C., the mayor there, Muriel Bowser, organized a citywide, I'm not sure if it was a citizens assembly technically, but certainly a consultation on the use of AI in city government that was facilitated by AI. If memory serves, I think they used the deliberation.io platform. I haven't spoken to anyone who was directly involved in that. I would love to know what the city's perspective was and how effective it was for engaging people and how useful the policy feedback was.
Yeah, I think there's more to dig in there and how you engage citizens around this. Go ahead. Sorry, Ruth.
And there's also the Collective Intelligence Project, and they are doing very large scale listening to people about AI and how it should be integrated into society. Now, not a citizens assembly in that a government is not doing it, but they have a lot of really good data on how people feel about this technology being incorporated into government, into other aspects of our lives. That's probably the biggest group I know that is doing that kind of thinking on AI. The companies do some of it, right? Anthropic sort of famously had a crowdsourced constitution. A lot of that's more marketing than reality, but there are groups who are really thinking about this very deeply.
So I want to get back to the industrialization piece that you talked about before, Bruce. And this question for both of you, but maybe I'll start with you, Bruce, that if you were advising elected officials today, or maybe even party people, right? Because elected officials may go, but people working in political parties, building pipelines, supporting leaders in different places at all levels, president, mayors, ministers, MPs, what should they be doing now to prepare for the AI era? I mean, you can say we're already in it, but like you were saying, the industrialization or industrial era started and then it kind of exploded and our lives were very different. Is there something political leaders should be doing now to prepare for this to become much more ubiquitous?
I mean, what we want is to not to make the same mistakes we did with social media, which is like leaving it completely unregulated, let the tech billionaires design it for their near-term profits, and the society democracy suffers as a result. So what we want is government to be involved, to start regulating this technology now. Now, this is happening. The EU passed the AI Act 2 years ago. It's not come into force yet for a bunch of political reasons. And we can debate the details, but, they're trying. They're looking at this technology and saying, we as government, as the voice of everybody, can't just step back and let the corporations do what they want. That we need to get involved. And I think that's really important. And, probably not going to happen in the US, but other countries can do this sort of thing. And I think that is vital as these technologies start permeating and changing society in all sorts of ways.
Yeah, I mean, this, but I go to a lot of technology conferences and the entrepreneurs here are massively against it because they say they have not just one arm, but maybe two arms behind their back because they're operating in a market where, they're really AI hampered. That's for another podcast, but it's quite interesting because it seems so straightforward to regulate and for humanity perhaps, but for economics, it's quite complicated. Again, for another podcast. How about you, Nathan? What should political leaders be doing besides regulation? Is there something normatively they can be doing? Are there skills they should be developing? Or the staff they should be hiring? Other things?
Yeah, complementary to what Bruce was saying, I think really the most urgent thing that political leaders should do is recognize and control the concentration of power and wealth in corporations that are developing AI. I think it's a great thing for political leaders to seek economic development and to seek the success of their local businesses. I don't think it's a good thing for them to seek the extravagant, enormous success of a single business, much less if it's a business in Silicon Valley and not in their jurisdiction. And that really is the way AI is developing today. We have 4 or 5 companies that are capturing literally trillions of dollars in wealth at the expense of not only the public, I would argue, but of other businesses as well. And I think we urgently need to reform that ecosystem. One model for this that Bruce and I have talked about is to provide a public alternative, a public option for AI infrastructure that can set a competitive baseline for private industry and also offer a meaningful alternative to going to those 3, 4, 5 big AI providers. When Bruce and I started writing about this, I think for many, maybe for us too, it felt like a pipe dream. Where is this going to happen? Who's going to do it? Can a government really develop the physical infrastructure, much less the models involved in AI? And today we have real world examples of that. We have Switzerland, where Swiss public institutions led by ETH Zurich and other research institutions leveraged public computing infrastructure at the Swiss National Supercomputing Center to develop a modern large language model, a model called Apertus that they're continuing to develop and is now being offered as a public good that anyone can use on their own, and also is now spawning a small ecosystem of nonprofits that are operating those models effectively at cost for others to use, so they don't have to bring their own physical infrastructure. And they're actually aggregating public computing resources in Switzerland and around the world to actually power those models. And I think it's a really, really important alternative to make available in the ecosystem. It suggests how we may make this whole industry more sustainable instead of having a few companies chase rapid accumulation of wealth, to chase artificial general intelligence, to chase incremental gains and leaderboards. Instead, to have institutions that are incentivized to serve the public interest, first and foremost, to develop AI more sustainably, even to use renewable energy in the development of those models and to make them available as public goods. I think that is a meaningful alternative to corporate AI, and one that I hope every government will look at and invest in.
Well, I love how specific that is, and that there's a model. And at Apolitical, one of the things we do is share models of things that have happened. And you may need to recreate the LLM, but you don't need to recreate the concept of designing your own and how to do that. I want to shift us back to democracy a little bit as we are getting near the end here. And so this is for both of you. And Bruce, I'll start with you. What is the one thing in democratic leadership that should never be delegated to AI?
Never is a long time. I mean, from now until the heat death of the universe, I'm not sure I can name something. I mean, we could talk about today.
Love?
I mean, so let's talk about that. We regularly delegate those feelings to Hallmark. I mean, I go to a store, find a piece of paper where somebody else wrote a bunch of heartfelt words, say, that's pretty good, sign my name to them, and give them to my partner. I mean, so we delegate a lot of things we don't think about.
The love is still from you, Bruce. You got the card.
I know, right? And what 300 years ago, I would be illiterate, and I would go to the market, and I would find a bard. I would find a balladeer, right? Who I would pay to write something for me. I mean, this is not new. The use of assistive tech is ancient and really depends on the tech. I mean, right now we can talk about a lot of things that make no sense to delegate. But fast forward 100 years, I'm not sure you can talk about that. It's the world will be very, very different.
Okay, Bruce, then let me give you a 10-year time period.
I don't know. I mean, the technology is changing, like improving a few percent every week. And we don't know, and this is truly we don't know, is this a trajectory that's continuing or will it plateau? There are just so many unknowns with this tech.
Yeah.
If I can jump in, Bruce, I think one of the things one of the things that Bruce has done that I think is helpful is kind of spell out what that progression looks like of building trust, not just by the user, but by a whole society and delegating tasks to AI. So Bruce, I'll tell the story that you usually tell, which is imagine a government administration which is responsible for deciding who's eligible for a benefit, whether it's health insurance, a disability benefit, whatever it is. Today I think a lot of us would be uncomfortable with receiving a response in the mail that says a machine decided that you don't get health insurance this month, for example. But there are a lot of those decisions that are probably easy yeses. Hopefully most of the people applying for benefits are eligible, and the government may take a month to decide it, but ultimately they're going to say, yes, of course you get this benefit. Can we start by delegating those easy yeses to machines? And then secondarily, is there a category of really easy no's where it's just obvious categorically the person's not going to be eligible? Can we delegate that? And then can we incrementally, with disclosure, with verification, with validation, start using the artificial intelligence in the middle too to make the harder decisions, making sure it has the appropriate context, making sure there's transparency and oversight on that process. I think that is generally how these types of automations get put into practice. I think that will happen in governance. I think that is the process by which a community becomes comfortable delegating something that they wouldn't have been comfortable delegating in the past. I'm not spelling out this progression to say it's easy or that I want it to happen in every case, but I just, I see that happening in enough domains that I think it is the future for a lot of these hard to delegate decisions in democracy as well.
That's super helpful. So I'm a politician or a staffer listening to you all. What are some good resources that I can sort of try to, as much as one can, sort of keep up with the field, with changes, with use cases? Where do I go? Bruce?
In the U.S., I want to recommend Tech Congress. I think they're a great organization, and they are there for U.S. staffers in Congress. I mean, that's what they're doing. So that's probably a singular a resource in the United States.
And Bruce, are you thinking of PopVox Foundation as well?
Yes, I
The
am.
organization
Why am I
led by
saying
Marcy
technologist?
Harris?
You're right.
Yeah.
PopVox. Sorry.
Marcy Harris,
Marcy
Pop Fox,
Harris.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, she's a hero. I'm really glad to bring her name into this conversation. Nathan, what do you recommend people to sort of know enough but not get overwhelmed?
Well, forgive me for plugging our great colleague and where some of our work is featured as well, but Danielle Allen here at Harvard is running a fantastic publication called The Renovator, which you can find on Substack. It features a lot of the research from her lab on democracy renovation at the Kennedy School, but also other voices who are speaking to how democracy can be renovated in general, including by using technology. Bruce and I are writing a series of case studies for The Renovator now that we're calling Rewiring Democracy now, updates on stories from our book. And a lot of what we've talked about just now, including those case studies in Japan and Switzerland, you can find that in more detail at The Renovator.
Fantastic. We will share that in the show notes. So what do you wish people would ask you, but they never do?
Yeah, well, I'm thinking of one of the beautifully reasoned arguments that we make in our book, which is all about what should we do about all of this? You know, Bruce and I have shared many case studies. We've shared many of our concerns in this conversation. We've shared some opportunities that we're opportunistic about. What should we do about it all? We end in our book with a framework for thinking about that, which is in terms of 4 Rs, which starts with resisting inappropriate uses of AI. I think the recent debacle between Anthropic and the Pentagon and OpenAI is a valuable example of what it can look like for engineers or even companies to stand up to say, we don't think AI should be used in this way. I'm not calling Anthropic out as heroes in this. I don't think any corporation is really acting in the public interest, but I do think that was a moment that spotlighted resistance to inappropriate uses of AI and surveillance, for example. But people should also advocate for responsible use of AI. You know, here in the U.S. context, we often talk about how many of our democratic agencies don't operate in a multilingual way, even though our population is very multilingual. I think that's unacceptable. I think we should use AI to make government more accessible to people that speak any language. Machine translation is not perfect, but it is good enough to do that now, and I think we should use it. The third R is to reform the ecosystem of AI. What we talked about earlier in terms of providing alternatives to the concentration of wealth in big tech companies, that idea of public AI, for us is a powerful example of reform. And then lastly, renovation, what that publication, The Renovator, I just mentioned, is all about figuring out what are the foundational structural reforms to our democracy that may not be specific to AI or specific to technology, but are renovations urgently needed to respond to the problems that AI is exacerbating and accelerating. In the US context, we think of problems like campaign finance reform and the accessibility of the ballot. I think we urgently need to reform those problems before AI makes them worse.
Okay, really, really helpful. So the last question, if there's one bit of hope you can leave people with that you haven't brought up yet, like something that's happening in the world that gives a lot of hope around that AI is not going to eat us, that AI is not going to destroy democracy. So many people I talk to, particularly in Europe, really have a negative view of AI, understandably, right? But the context is very different here. Any last stories of hope, Bruce, want to share?
I think we shared a lot of stories of hope from Japan, from France. We have stories from Brazil, from Germany, United States, Canada, of these technologies doing good. I mean, AI is fundamentally a power enhancer. It enhances the power of the humans who use it. In the hands of humans who want more democracy, AI will do that. But in the hands of people who want less democracy, AI will do that too. And a lot of the problems of AI and democracy are not AI problems. They're democracy problems exacerbated by AI. And we often know the solutions to those problems because they're not new. And, you know, I think Nathan and I both have a lot of faith in democracy that, you know, we flail around a lot, but eventually we figure it out. And I think we're going to do that here too.
Thank Nathan.
I think that's a beautiful note to end on, Bruce. I will say I still maintain that faith in democracy that we both expressed in our book, despite the very visible evidence I see of democratic decay all around us here in 2026. That absolutely gives me pause and gives me tremendous concern. But I still agree with what you said, Bruce, that we can chart a better course. I hope we will continue as a society to find useful ways to use technology in making democratic processes better. And I maintain that hope even in the midst of a lot of negative signals around us.
Well, what gives me hope is you two doing this, not just the podcast, but there are a lot of ways that people can live their life and sort of step back and not take chances. And you are really giving to the rest of us. And for being on this podcast, we will make sure it gets to at least our 155 organizations around the world that are training and finding political leaders to help them figure out what this means as agents, as facilitators of democracy, and then a much wider audience of people who care about this work. So I just really, really want to thank you for your life's work. I genuinely really mean it. You do things every day. Do you have another book coming?
After you write a book, there's a time when you never want to write a book again, and that time has to
You're still there
before you can think about another book. And there's also the question of, are book length objects the right way to present ideas in today's society? A lot of short attention spans, and maybe there are alternative ways. I mean, Nathan and I are doing a lot of writing articles and shorter pieces, so we're enjoying that. So maybe another book, maybe not. We'll see.
I hope you consider it and come to Berlin. We have great democracy stop tissues here where we gather the technology community, the political community, the community really thinking about how to renovate democracy for the 21st century. And you two are really important architects to that. So with that, thank you very much, both of you, Bruce and Nathan.